Hello and welcome back to the Folklore Hiking Stick Workshop. Today we're going to answer a basic question that comes back to you if you make copper tips. A lot of you guys are using copper tips, so this might be relevant to you, or you may be thinking of doing copper tips. At some point in that hiking stick, whether it be in 3, 5 or even 10 years time, you may be in a position where you want to either refurb that copper tip or swap it out for something else of your choice. And I'm going to show you how you can do that with minimal effort and minimal tools, and what the options are available to you. Because I do have a candidate, a stick here, and this whole stick I'm going to do a complete rebuild on it, and I'll show you those various components in various other videos. But we're only concerned about the actual copper tip in this video. You can see it's been hammered over. Why is it so hammered over? I used this on a hard standing rows to train the dog. Basically, to get him to go left or right, the stick would be on either side I wanted him to go. Hit the floor hard like that, and he would move in the opposite direction. And it was a good way to train him without me having to shout directions to him. He always moved to the opposite direction of the sound, and it worked. But consequently, you can see after 12 months of hammering away on the road training dogs, which you wouldn't do in a hiking or walking situation, because it would be just placing it down. You know, you're not hammering it to make the biggest noise you can. So, yeah, we're going to have a look at that tip and the options that we have available to us to reinstate that stick back in good hiking and walking condition. So here we have 3 variants of tips that can go on a hiking stick. Starting off, you've got a rubber one in 22mm there. I'll explain why, but it's a standard rubber tip. They do come in different, obviously, variances in shapes. And yeah, this is the one I have available to me. And you can see it holds a metal insert inside of it, just to give it more durability. This is a piece of copper I've cut off, and I'm in the process of making a copper ferrule to go on the bottom. And that's pretty self-explanatory. It's 22 gauge, UK. And moving on to a manufacturer's tip. This is of like a stainless steel, thin stainless steel bucket skirt. You can see the wood's all been cracked off in there. I haven't dug it out at the moment. And it's got a slightly heavier walled tip on the bottom, and that is been basically in a rounded style. You can get them in a variety of styles, like pointed, flat, you know, whatever takes your fancy. But that is the typical manufactured one. My copper ones like I use, and rubber tips, which I do offer also. So that's the 3 I'm going to discuss. Right then, if yours is looking like this and you want to do something quick and fast, and you don't want to go reshaping the tip itself, and you don't want to lose any length by cutting it off and, you know, shaping it from there, a rubber tip is a fantastic option to keep your stick in service. But you will have to get rid of all that elephant foot, which is like basically rounded over copper from striking the floor in hard surfaces. How do you get that off? Well, quite simply, a simple answer would be a metal file. It doesn't have to be overly aggressive because copper is soft, but it will require some work, some safety glasses and some gloves and a file. If you're not confident doing that, I'm sure you will have a neighbour, a friend or somebody that can do this for you. It takes very little time, and the skill level, you know, as long as you don't dig too far into the existing good copper, you'll be fine. All you're trying to do is get this back to 22mm, which will be accepted into the hole on this ferrule. You will get the ferrule, if you've got a copper tip, whatever size copper tip you've got on there, if it's 22mm or 28 UK sizes. I don't use 15mm because it's just too small a peg and they do tend to break. So 22 or 28, you'll get the corresponding ferrule. You will file this down nice and flat, so this basically will just drop on, and then you will have your stick, so far as the tip, back in usable service. And you shouldn't need to take anything more off the actual chamfer that goes down into it, because if a stick is to look nice, it's got to flow, so that will give plenty of room for this to actually stretch over, and you won't have to do any sanding or shaping, and you may not feel confident, or you may not want to invest the time in it. So we'll sand this, well, we'll get the metal file and we'll start working this, and I'll show you this option and how you can then fit this. So all I'm going to do is get the file and work around in a nice smooth motion to get back to the existing copper ferrule and take off all the bit that's been elephant footed back around or peeled back. So basically it's just keep working. It will require a little bit of effort. You could even do this with a mechanical grinder and a metal disc, but that would require you being extremely careful and basically know how and be safe around power tools. But yeah, just keep working around. As you can see, it's starting to come there, you can see it. And just basically keep going all the way around. So I'll bring you back when I'm pretty near where I want to be. So I'm almost there, and I'm just being careful now, because I don't want to take anything more off the copper ferrule than I have to. But it needs to be smooth so it doesn't cut or damage the rubber ferrule as it slides over. So I'm just going around, trying to get it nice and rounded off. Once you've got the bulk of the metal off, you can find doing the shaping becomes quite easy. There. Just round off all the ends. It doesn't require too much work. Just sealing the end over. Trying to get rid of any short bits. I know there is a metal washer in the bottom. There, that's not looking too bad. So I've completely, took off all that elephant's foot and got back to copper. It doesn't have to be made too pretty, because quite simply, that being 22mm, this being rubber 22mm, this has a lot more give and flexibility than copper. So I can just put a little bit of a wiggle, move it around. And there you go, it's as simple as that. It's pretty flush to the actual chamfer. So like we said, it does look okay, and it looks in place and in keeping on this hiking stick. There's no overall aesthetic disadvantage. It's just a style. Why do I use copper? I've explained before, because I'm here in Cornwall. The tin mines produce copper as a byproduct, some of them, or they produce copper in its own right. And a corner stick with a copper tip, basically. So the only other thing is when you're hiking, rubber doesn't provide that direct contact feel to the ground. You can feel the ground a lot more positively coming back up through the stick. It's a direct connection. You don't have any soft rubber contact in between it. So all the vibration, the sensitivity that you can feel, as your stick is scuffing and digging in, you feel that transmitted to the handle, and it gives you a better sense of awareness to where you are in the environment and how your stick is gripping the ground and what you may need to do to adjust it. A rubber tip takes a little bit of that away, but it's better obviously if you're not going to be doing any off-road. You really ought to just stick to a rubber tip, because that will provide you with the best traction on hard standing road. And basically like pedestrian areas or paving and that, the copper tips really are just for hiking and being out on the trail. But in any case, we've achieved that and that looks nice. But what about if we don't want to go down this route? We want to install a copper tip, or we want to install one of these kind of tips, the actual tips that you get with what manufacturers you can buy online, and they come in a wide variety of styles. Like I said, pointed and they're on flat, whatever you want. Basically, you've got to shape your tip on your stick. I've had to shape this, as you can see, to accept 22mm copper pipe. There's every chance you'll have to shape it even further down to accept this. So as you can see, that manufacturer's tip is obviously of a smaller gauge than that copper. So for me to actually get the copper off and put a new copper ferrule on, it's not going to require as much shaping as it will to get that manufacturer's one on. But we do have plenty of meat on this as it is when we get that bit of copper off to shape it to put that one on. I'm not actually going to put that one on, because obviously I'm going to put a copper one on, but I'll get this one off. You can see how I do it, the leftover copper on this, and then you can see me shape it down to begin to accept a new copper ferrule. The process is the same. You would just be doing it to fit that bucket there on the end of this particular stick. Right then, you can see I don't need much in the way of tools to get this off. Basically what I'm going to do is use a junior hacksaw and just cut in a diagonal line, rotating the stick and not going too far into the peg or dowel that this is seated over, so I don't damage it. And on top of that, just to demonstrate, you don't need a lot of power tools. I would possibly myself have used a grinder for speed just to go across, but you don't actually need it. This is quite adequate. So I'm just going to start here, make my first cut, and let's get this off. I could do with a new blade in this saw. So what you'll end up is with a diagonal line basically cut all the way around. It doesn't matter if you go a little bit too far in here, because we're going to have to shape that down to get the new ferrule to sit a bit further. So all I'm going to do is basically pry this open. It might require a little bit of effort, be careful, and as you can see, it's beginning to open there. If you've got any actual pins still in there, you'll just have to lever and wiggle it gently to get it up far enough that you can use a pair of nail extractors to then just pull it out. But it looks like it's gone right the way through in behind. So all I got to do is just bend this copper and get it off. There. And there you go. That's a leftover copper ferrule. Right, the observant of you would say that looks a little bit scorched, and that was quite simply, I did actually, when I was showing you how to file off, I did put the grinder around just to speed the process up. But as I said, if you've got time on your hands, a file will do it just as good. Copper is soft, and I say if you've got a few moments, it can be quite therapeutic and pleasurable because you're working on an item that you're going to enjoy outside yourself, and there is satisfaction in feeling you've done that yourself. But yeah, I did put the grinder. Now I've got to clean off the score. It's not necessary, but I'm just going to, just because I want to show you. You can see that as I cut, I just touched the wood. I haven't gone deep. That's what I was saying. Don't worry too much. And as you can see, I've actually got one of the copper pins in there, which obviously made the wood swell and bite the outside of the copper wall. But I do have to start shaping this again. So all I'm going to do is do it roughly with a file and finish up with sandpaper. I'm not going to go getting a disc out and power tools. There isn't going to be enough work involved for me to do that. And I want to show you that you can do it by hand. So yeah, let's start making this happen. But first, I've got to get my copper, I'm going to size my copper. And I've got a piece of copper here, and I'm thinking this will be what I want to put on. So as you can see, from where it was, it's coming up to there. So from about there onwards, I've got to start bringing that back down in a bit of a chamfer. So let's go down into the woodshed with a file and some sandpaper and make this happen. Right, I'm down here, and with my bit of copper, all I'm going to do is just roughly gauge it. And I can see roughly where I want to be. And I want to start taking some of the meat off with an aggressive file. But I would suggest, if you're not fully competent or you don't feel confident, just go for a lighter file. Take less wood off and do it more often than take a lot of wood off and go too small and ruin the project. So here we go. Now you can see what I mean. I've removed, that looks a bit brutal, and if you were not skilled, or you were actually a little bit nervous of the project to start with, that could be quite off-putting, because I have removed a substantial amount of wood with an aggressive file like this. My actual ferrule, I've showed you how I make these, so I'm not going to labour the point too much at the minute. But you can see I've already chamfered out the inside, so I can start to see it go on. I need to have it chamfered, otherwise it'll bite on the wood and you'll have a fair job to get it on. You do have to remember, this has to be just past the point where it flows over. It's got to be snug, and it's got to be at the point where you hammer it on to give that compression to the wood inside the actual copper tube. So you don't want to remove too much wood. From here on in, it's all kind of like being sensible and guessing and taking your time. But I do have that in my other video, how you fit those. All I'm showing you is basically that you can reinstate another copper ferrule. Got aeroplanes going over, people are obviously off on their holidays, but I have removed a lot of wood there now, and what I'm doing is I'm using a smoother file to kind of gain the shape back I want. as I said before, this whole stick here, I'm going to do a multiple array of videos depicting me getting this one back into service. So even though this video is centered around the actual ferrules and what you can do with the tips once they've become past their sell-by date, I'm going to show you the start to finish of making this stick back into good serviceable condition. Right, you can see it's just about there. I've just now basically got to clean this top bit up, then run the sandpaper over it. I don't have to be too concerned about the actual peg, because obviously that's going to be hidden inside the actual tube. Right, all I'm going to do is clean the peg up with some sandpaper now, and then we'll fit this copper ferrule. So yeah, we're nearly there. Right then, that cutter crimps the end over slightly, so what I've got to do is get a chainsaw file and file that crimp off. That allows it to slide onto the wooden peg without biting too much on the wooden walls. So basically it's just me going around and taking the crimp off and flattening it out so it matches the wall of the existing copper tube there. All I'm going to do now is run the square edge of the profile of the file around where I've just filed, and that just takes any burrs off and gives me a slightly sharp, well, a slightly sharper but clean edge, and it's not inward facing. And then just file off around where I've just been working. So there, I'm quite happy with that. Now I've got to countersink and put the holes for the pins. Right, I'm going to put this in the vise, if I can get to it. I've got all my other tools in the way, or garden cutting. Right. Now I'm just going to drill, just to countersink it, take out a siphon or a funnel shape in the copper, but I don't want to go right the way through. You can see I haven't gone right the way through, but I've given it a kind of like a countersink. I'm now going to get a small little punch and punch through the wall. So all I'm doing is getting a little punch, placing it inside where I've just drilled, and that creates a nice countersinked hole for your pin to go in, if you can see that there. I'm going to do one further down, and then I think we'll fit this one. Right then, now I've got to actually get this onto the peg. So how am I going to achieve that is with some sprayed varnish. I'm going to give it a coat on the actual peg and just spray inside the tube to lubricate it and also provide some protection for the wood from water ingress. So a quick squirt inside the actual copper tube on the peg. Get it the right way, place it on, and now we're going to hammer it home. There, we're home now, and that's our copper ferrule on the end of this stick. So basically, the holes that we drilled in the copper ferrule, I'm now going to put some pins in those holes. So let's make that happen. Do the next one. There we go. A nice copper tip on that one now. So that's basically how I remove a copper ferrule, a used one, install a new one, and you would be doing the same process, just shaping it, the peg to fit inside that bucket, and then you would be putting a, if you can see a little hole there, a little tack in there just to seat and secure it. But yeah, exactly the same process would be adopted to fit one of these like tips that you can buy from a manufacturer already, all ready to go once you've buy it from the packet. I've explained why I use copper, quite simply because of being down here in Cornwall. But 22 is my main size, but I do go up to 28 for some models and if customers require it. This here is 22 for the simple reason also it will go right over the top of that. So if you buy a hiking stick from me and you want a rubber tip and you want it on a copper tip and then a rubber tip put over the top, that's quite easily available and I can do that. It just wouldn't be quite so long as this. I would leave it so that the copper actually covered the whole, the actual rubber of this covered all the copper. But as you can see, you can put a rubber ferrule over the top. And that's the reason I use 22mm, as I was alluding to. So yeah, I just thought it would be interesting for you guys to see how you can go about and replace them. The copper like tips. Then once the copper is wore down, it's not a throwaway item. You then have the choice whether to go back and put another copper tip on, a rubber ferrule, or a manufacturer of your choice. So yeah, I hope that was of some help to you guys. The only thing I will say is that you may gradually lose a small bit of length over time. So I always suggest ordering a hiking stick maybe 1.5 inches longer than what you traditionally want, so that, you know, it compensates, you know, over possibly 10 years. If you do need to put a new copper tip on, it will allow you to lose a small fraction of length and it still be quite adequate for you. But this one here, like I said, is my own one, and from here on in I'm not going to the complete finishing stages because this is a work in progress. Like I said, we're going to repair the crack in the handle, and then we're going to strip this, all the varnish, how I strip it back, how I revarnish it. But on top of that, I'm going to, well, this was done in my early days, so I want to just tidy up the wood burning. So yeah, we'll see this one totally refurbed in the end. But I hope you enjoyed coming along just to see a copper tip replaced. This is Andy from the Folklore Hiking Stick Workshop. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to catch you guys out on the trail.